There's a lot of people online who talk about how you got to make your life better, you got to be more efficient, you got to optimize your life. But what does that actually mean? Optimize for what exactly? Make better how? Normally it's used in a feel good sort of way. The kind where, yeah, you feel better, but nothing actually improves. It just, yeah, it's one of those things where they say something and you can fill it with everything you like, but they could be talking about an entirely different thing. But because they're so vague, there's no real way to determine what it is they're discussing, right? It's a container word. You put all the things you want into the container word, and they don't have to say those things. So you don't have to find something different. I think there are ways to optimize your life, but you have to decide what you're optimizing for, right? You could, or to put it another way, there's a lot of ways to make your life better, but you have to decide what you want before you can. And that's something you have to do. Nobody can tell you how to do it until you know what you want. People can tell you what they think you should want, but unless you figure out what you want, you won't be able to. That's not something I can tell you what to do on. That's not something anyone else can tell you what to do on. That's something you have to decide for yourself. And if you don't decide that, other people will decide it for you at best. So what can you optimize for? Well, you can optimize for a lot of things, but it depends on what specific task you're talking about. I'll give some examples, right? If I optimize taking out the trash, well, that's great. But there's only so much you can actually do to optimize taking out the trash, right? There is a finite cap on how good that can get. Versus if I want to optimize for speed when I go shopping, that's a whole different ballgame. And again, there's going to be a finite cap. But there will be an issue that comes up when you want to do certain things that somebody else might want to do otherwise. So for example, I don't particularly enjoy shopping, but if I'm with someone who does, and they enjoy the process of shopping, that's an enjoyable thing to them, my desire to go quickly through it so it's done will clash with their wish to enjoy it. So that's something you also have to be aware of, is if you enjoy the thing, well, maybe you don't want to optimize for speed. You want to optimize for your enjoyment of the thing. Or you want to find some middle ground where, okay, you don't spend 24 hours a day on it, but you don't also spend 10 minutes on it either. And that can be a relatively difficult thing. And anything that involves other people is also going to make it more difficult, because it's not just you have to consider at that point. Although you could. That is also an option, but that's also a choice that you're making. For instance, with shopping, if you're the kind of person who really doesn't like shopping, then maybe spending a little extra to have stuff delivered is better for you. Sure, you give up a few things, which might be, discovering new stuff at the store. Maybe you're paying a little more, so you're giving up a little extra money. But those are all choices and trade-offs you can make. So if you value time more than the shopping experience, then that might be a valid trade-off for you. But if you're the kind of person who enjoys wandering the aisle, seeing what's there, then maybe you don't want to do that. If you're also the kind of person who purchases stuff on impulse, you might be better served by doing delivery for a little while and dealing with the impulse of shopping instead. Right? But it all depends on what you want out of life. And if you don't ever consider what you want out of life, you'll never know where to make changes in your life to get more of what you want. You'll just kind of float through, and you might be fine with that. But are you really? That's the question you have to ask yourself, if you consider it at all. But you can definitely go too far with this if you optimize for something wrong. And I say wrong, and that's also a container word. But if you optimize for things you don't want, right? As I mentioned in the shopping thing, if you enjoy shopping and you optimize the time out of it so you get it all delivered, you're not going to have that. So you might find that you prefer that. One thing that comes up in games, particularly RPGs, or at least you used to, I don't know if you still see it online, but there used to be the phrase for min-maxers, right? I'm sure they still exist, but one of the complaints about them was they optimized the fun out of the game, right? Their characters were so mechanically efficient in the context of the game that there wasn't really room for struggle, which isn't a common thing in life, right? There's always going to be struggles in life, so you don't really have to worry about things in that way. But you want to make sure you aren't optimizing the fun out of stuff. If you like painting, you don't want to turn your painting time into an assembly line where you don't get to enjoy the process anymore. And maybe that is part of the process you enjoy, right? That's why you have to decide these things for yourself. You can't let somebody else tell you how to do it. For instance, I like to paint miniatures. I do not like batch painting. So I won't do that, right? Because it takes the fun out of it for me, and then I don't paint at all. So you got to consider the things you do and see if they're giving you the things you want. For instance, like in video games, if there's daily quests, you want to make sure you actually enjoy doing the daily quest and that it's not becoming work, right? It's not becoming something that you don't want to do but feel you have to do, because then you won't get the enjoyment from it. And maybe it's time to step back from that video game and do something else, right? So you really want to sit down and consider what exactly you're optimizing your life for. And even if you haven't consciously picked something, you will be optimizing for something, right? And perhaps optimizing isn't the right word. You'll be aiming at something, whether or not you've consciously picked it, or perhaps a better way to describe it is what you're aiming at with life. Regardless of whether or not you've consciously picked it, you are aiming at something. But if you don't pick your aim, you will be pushed towards what other people want for you. And maybe you're fine with that. Maybe that's what you want out of life. But maybe it's not, right? And if it's not, if you're dissatisfied with your life, perhaps the first thing to do is to figure out what you actually want to aim at and then optimize your life for it. If you want more free time to spend with your family, right? Maybe that means you change the length of your commute. That if you just don't want to commute, you don't want to spend the time in the car with the extra stress, which I think is fair. Maybe that means you have to give up a few other things to live closer to work, or find a different job, or find a remote position, right? There's tons of options. You're not locked into any one thing, and you don't have to make those changes right away. There's stuff you can aim towards, but you have to make that choice so that you know what to change in your life, what optimizations to make, what to improve, what to cut away. Those are all things to look into. But don't let somebody give you that feel-good advice of, oh, you got to make improvements, you got to get better, without telling you what exactly they're talking about. Because, or at least without considering what exactly you would have to do those things. Because otherwise it's just feel-good words that don't do anything for you. So you want to really consider what it is you're doing. You want to live with intentionality. That's really kind of what this gets down to. You want to make your life better, you have to live with intentionality, which means you have to make choices on what you're doing. And you don't have to do those every day. You can make that choice once and say, this is what I'm going to do from now on, and then do it going forward without consciously making that choice every day, because you've already made that choice. But you do have to make that choice at some point, or you will find yourself somewhere where you're just not happy. You're not where you want to be. You don't have the life you wanted. And now you're 10 years down the line and you have a lot less time to get there. So, well, that's all I've got for this week. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.